The coffee had gone lukewarm before I noticed. I was watching the steam stop. That's the kind of thing I do now, watch small things finish. When my phone lit up on the counter, screen down, vibrating against the granite like it was trying to get my attention without being rude about it. Mom. I let it ring twice. Not for drama. I just wasn't ready to switch out of the quiet I'd built for myself that morning. "Hey," I said, and my voice came out flatter than I meant it to. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a pause, the kind she uses when she's deciding how to open a cabinet she knows is full of something breakable. "How are you?"
"Fine. Folding laundry." "Good. Good." Another pause. I could hear a cabinet actually close on her end. Soft, deliberate. She was in the kitchen. Probably standing in the same spot she stands in when she's about to tell me something she's already rehearsed. "Listen," she said, and I felt my hands stop moving over a towel I'd already folded twice. "We've been talking, your dad and I, about the wedding." "Okay." "And we think, with space being what it is, and with how things have been lately between you and your sister." She said it the way you'd mention rain in the forecast. No weight to it, just information. "We think it might be best if you don't come." I didn't say anything. Not because I was speechless. I want to be clear about that, because people always assume silence means shock. Mine wasn't shocking. It was something closer to recognition, like watching a door you already knew.
I let her talk. I folded another towel. When she finally said goodbye, I said it back, evenly, as we'd just discussed the weather after all. Then I set the phone down, screen up this time, and looked at it for a long moment. The way you look at a number on a piece of paper you've been pretending not to remember. $48,000. I hadn't brought it up. She hadn't either. Not yet. 6 months earlier, I sat at my parents' dining table while my sister talked about napkin colors. That's not a metaphor. She had actual swatches. Ivory, blush, champagne. Fanned out next to the mashed potatoes like they were more important than dinner. And, in fairness, to her, they were. "Champagne reads warmer in photos," she said. "Ivory's too stark with the venue lighting." "Whatever you think, honey," my mother said, in the voice she uses for things she has no real opinion on, but wants credit for supporting. I wasn't part of the conversation. I hadn't been for a while. Not in any dramatic way. Nobody had drawn a line and told me to stand on the other side of it. It was quieter than that. I'd just slowly become the person at the table who answered when spoken to and otherwise watched. I'm good at watching. I didn't used to think of it as a skill. My dad was quiet that night too, but his quiet had a different texture than mine. Mine was comfortable. He had a low hum underneath it, like a refrigerator you only notice when the kitchen goes silent. He kept refilling his water glass, kept checking his phone and turning it face down too quickly. At one point, my mother reached for the salt and said, not to me, not really to anyone, "We'll figure out the rest once this
Welcome
loan
back.
thing
Today
settles."
we're focusing on stream quality and
Nobody
consistency.
looked up.
Your feedback helps us improve.
My sister kept
Let's dive
talking
in.
about centerpieces. I looked up. "What loan thing?" I asked. The way you ask about something you assume is small, because that's what you're supposed to do at a dinner table when an adult says something vague. You ask once, lightly, and let them decide how much of an answer you deserve. "Oh, nothing," my mother said. "Just your father's business stuff. Boring." Your father's business stuff. I noted the word your, the way it put distance between her and whatever it was. like she was already preparing an exit from a room she hadn't entered yet. My dad didn't correct her. He didn't add anything. He just turned his water glass a quarter turn on the table, like he did when he was deciding whether something needed saying. I let it go. Not because I believed it was boring, because I'd learned by then that in my family, the things people call boring are usually the things they're hoping you'll never ask about twice. I went home that night and didn't think about it again for almost a week. But here's the thing about being the quiet one in a family that mistakes your quiet for absence. You notice more than people think. I noticed my mother's phone face down on the counter the next time I visited. I noticed she'd started referring to consolidating things when she used to say saving up. I noticed my dad had stopped golfing on Saturdays, which had nothing to do with money on the surface, except that everything in that house eventually had something to do with money. You just had to wait for it to surface. I didn't ask again. I started watching instead. There's a difference between the two, and it took me a long time to understand it. Asking is for people who still expect honesty. Watching is for people who've stopped expecting it and started collecting it instead. Quietly, patiently, the way you'd collect rain in something you don't mind filling slowly. I didn't know the number yet, not the real one, but I knew the shape of it. I knew it was big enough that my mother had started saying, "We'll figure it out," in the tone people use when they haven't figured out anything at all. I just didn't know yet that the shape of it would eventually have my name written somewhere inside it, in ink I never remembered putting there. I didn't cry after the call with my mother. I want to say that plainly, because I think people expect it, and I'd be lying if I let you imagine me sitting on the kitchen floor somewhere, phone in my lap, mascara doing whatever mascara does in movies. That's not what happened. I finished the laundry. I put the towels away. In the same order I always do. The ones with frayed edges in the back, the good ones in front for guests we rarely have. Then I sat down at the table, where 6 months earlier, my sister had once fanned out napkin swatches like they were tarot cards. And I just sat there for a while, in the quiet, doing nothing at all. I think that scared me a little, how easy the nothing was. Grief usually comes loud, at least at first. Mine came in the shape of a closed mouth. I kept waiting for the part where I'd want to call someone and say, "Can you believe what she said to me?" And it never came. What came instead was a strange, clean stillness, like a pond after something heavy sinks to the bottom and the surface just settles. I didn't call my sister. I didn't text her congratulations or ask about the venue or pretend the wound wasn't there. I didn't owe her performance. What I did was open my laptop. I scrolled through my contacts for a long time before I found the name I was looking for, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. Daniel. We'd worked together briefly, years back, before he left to do something with credit consulting, something I'd half listened to at the time because it hadn't mattered to me then. It mattered now. I called him before I let myself think too hard about why. "Hey, stranger," he said, picking up on the third ring, surprised in the easy way people are when an old number resurfaces. "This is unexpected." "I know. Sorry to just... I have a weird question." "Shoot." I hesitated, just for a second, choosing the words carefully, the way you choose a single key off a ring without knowing yet which door it opens. "If someone's name ends up on a loan," I said, "without them signing anything themselves, is that even possible? Legally, I mean?" There was a pause on his end. Not a long one, just enough for me to hear him shift from casual to careful. Depends, he said slowly. Co-signing, joint accounts, identity stuff. There are a few ways it happens. Some of them are mistakes. Some of them aren't. Another beat. Why? Everything okay? I'm not sure yet, I said. Honestly. I might need you to help me find out. I didn't explain further. He didn't push. That's the kind of person he'd always been. Comfortable with unfinished sentences, the way some people are comfortable with silence in a car. After we hung up, I sat there with my hands flat on the table, feeling something settle into place that I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even revenge. Not really. Not in the way people imagine that word, sharp and loud and immediate. It was just the first quiet step toward finding out exactly how deep my name had been buried in something I never agreed to carry. It started, like most things in my family do, with a favor. 2 years ago, long before swatches and seating charts, long before any of this had a shape, my father called me on a Tuesday night, his voice doing the thing it does when he's about to ask for something and wants to make it sound smaller than it is. I need you to sign something, he said. Boring bank stuff. Refinancing the house, lower interest, that kind of thing. They just need a second name on file as a formality. A formality, I repeated. You know how banks are. They overcomplicate everything. He laughed, light, dismissive. It's nothing. 10 minutes, tops. I drove over that weekend. He had the papers laid out on the kitchen table already. Sticky tabs marking the pages I needed to sign. The way you'd prep a contract for someone you didn't want reading too closely. Though I didn't think that. Not then. Then I just thought, my dad needs 10 minutes of my time, and I have 10 minutes. I skimmed it. I'm not going to pretend I read every line, because I didn't. And that's the part that still sits uncomfortably in my chest when I think about it now. Not because I was foolish, but because I trusted the wrong kind of quiet. He didn't rush me. He didn't have to. He just stood there refilling his coffee, casual, present, trustworthy, while I signed where the tabs told me to. That's it? I asked. That's it, he said. Appreciate it, kid. I didn't think about it again for almost a year. Then came the dinner with the napkin swatches, the offhand comment, we'll figure out the rest once this loan thing settles. The water glass turned a quarter turn. The phone fell face down a little too quickly. I'd noticed all of it, filed it away the way I file away things I'm not ready to look at directly yet. It was Daniel who found the real shape of it. 3 weeks after that phone call, after I'd sat across from him at a coffee shop and handed him copies of documents I'd quietly requested. From my own bank. Documents that, as it turns out, anyone can request once they know their name is attached to something. It's not a refinance, he told me, sliding a folder back across the table. It's a personal loan. $48,000, taken out 2 years ago, against the equity in your name as cosigner, not your father's house, yours. I don't have a house, I said, too fast, like saying it out loud would make it less true. You do now, he said, on paper at least. He used a property you co-own with him, the one your grandmother left you both, as collateral. The loan's been in deferment, restructured twice. There's a balloon payment coming due. He paused. Soon. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was doing the math, not on paper, but in that quiet, internal place where you recalculate every memory you have of someone, frame by frame, looking for where the lie started showing through the smile. 10 minutes, tops, he'd said. I thought about the dinner, the swatches, your father's business stuff. boring. I thought about how easily my mother had distanced herself from it with one small pronoun, how she'd known enough to flinch away from the word our. They hadn't told me. Not when they took it out, not when it started slipping, not when they restructured it twice and let the due date creep closer like something they hoped would. Just quietly resolve itself before I ever had to know. They'd just decided, somewhere along the way, that I wasn't worth the conversation. And now they'd decided I wasn't worth a seat at my sister's wedding either. I sat there in that coffee shop, papers in front of me, and I didn't feel the urge to call them and scream, didn't feel the urge to drive over and demand an explanation I already had in writing. What I felt, and I remember this clearly because it surprised me, was calm. Because for the first time since at dinner, I wasn't the one in the dark anymore. They were. They just didn't know it yet. Day one, nobody called. I think they expected me to. That's the part that's almost funny in hindsight. They delivered the line about the wedding like a weather report, calm and certain, and then spent the next 3 days waiting for the storm they assumed would follow. I didn't post anything bitter online. I didn't call my aunt to vent, knowing it would travel back to my mother within the hour, the way family gossip always finds its fastest route home. I just lived, went to work, watered the plant on my windowsill that I always forget about until it's nearly dead. The silence wasn't a strategy. Not at first. I want to be honest about that. It started as just not having anything I wanted to say. But somewhere on day 2, I noticed what the silence was doing to everyone else, and that's when it became something closer to a decision. My sister texted me first. "Hey, hope you're not weird about the wedding thing, lol. Mom probably explained it badly. Things are just stressful right now with planning. Nothing personal. We still love you." 3 exclamation points in one message. I counted them, which tells you something about where my head was. I read it standing in my kitchen, phone in one hand, a spoon in the other, soup going cold on the stove behind me. I read it twice. The lol was doing a lot of work in that sentence, trying to make a closed door sound like a joke between us. I didn't answer. Not out of spite. I genuinely didn't know what honest thing I could say that wouldn't immediately become the headline of a family group chat. She's being so dramatic about this. So I said nothing, and I let the nothing sit there, untouched, for the rest of the afternoon. By evening, she'd sent a follow-up. "You okay?" 2 words, no exclamation points this time. That told me more than the first message had. I still didn't reply. I went to bed that night and slept fine, which surprised me a little. I think I expected the guilt to show up around 2 a.m., the way it usually does, knocking politely and then letting itself in. It didn't come. I just lay there in the dark, aware of how strange it felt to not perform anything for anyone. Not anger, not forgiveness, not hurt. Just quiet. Day 3, I let both go to voicemail. I listened to them later, back to back, like a before and after photo of the same emotion at 2 different temperatures. The first one was light. "Hey, sweetheart, just checking in. Give me a call when you get a chance. No rush." No rush, except there was. I could hear it underneath, that careful, practiced ease starting to fray at the seams. The second one, 4 hours later, had a different shape entirely. Slower. Smaller. "Honey, can you call me back? It's a little important." I sat with that voicemail, playing on a loop in my head for a long time after it ended, turning the word important over like a coin, looking at both sides of it. They weren't checking on my feelings anymore.
I knew, somehow, before they said it outright, that this had stopped being about the wedding entirely. I didn't call back that night either. I wanted to know how loud my silence would have to get before they finally said the real thing out loud, the thing none of us had said yet. The number sitting quietly in a folder on my desk, waiting its turn. I called my mother back on the 4th morning, not because I'd softened, but because I'd finished doing what I needed to do first, and because I wanted to hear, in real time, how she'd say it. She answered before the first ring finished. "Hi," she said, breathless in a way I'd never heard from her before. My mother is not a breathless woman. She spent 40 years curating a tone of unbothered control, the kind of calm that makes other people feel like they're overreacting just by comparison. That calm was gone. "You called," I said. Not a question, just a fact set down between us. "I did. How are you?" "Fine," I said. "You said it was important." There was a pause, the kind I recognized now, the cabinet closing kind. Except this time, I could hear her hand shaking slightly around whatever she was holding. "It's your father," she said. We're in a bit of trouble, financially. It's bigger than we thought it would be." "Okay." "There's a loan," she continued, and I let her keep going because I wanted to hear how much of it she'd say without me prompting her. "It's coming due. Soon. And it's a lot, honey. $48,000. She said the number like it cost her something just to let it leave her mouth. I didn't say anything for a second. Not because I didn't know. I'd known the exact figure, down to the cents, for weeks by then. I just wanted to feel what it was like to hear her say it first, out loud, to me, the daughter she'd quietly decided wasn't worth a seat at a wedding 3 days earlier. "And you're telling me this because?" I asked. My voice stayed level. I'd practiced that, if I'm honest. Not the words, just the levelness. "Because your name is on it," she said, finally, the sentence cracking slightly in the middle, like a dish set down too hard. "On the loan. We didn't think it would matter. Your father thought it was just a formality. And now the bank is saying—" "I know what the bank is saying," I said quietly. "I've known for a while." The silence on her end was different from any silence we'd had before. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't performative. It was the silence of someone realizing, mid-sentence, that the ground they were standing on had already shifted without their permission. "You knew?" she said. "I found out a few months ago, before the wedding conversation, before any of this." I let that sit there too, the same way I'd let her silence sit on day 1, on day 2, on day 3. Except now the imbalance had flipped so cleanly, it almost didn't need me to say anything else. It's a strange thing, watching someone realize too late that you've been 3 steps ahead the entire time. It doesn't feel like victory. Not exactly. It feels more like watching the weather change, the temperature dropping in a room you didn't even have to touch. I think that's the part people misunderstand about moments like this. We assume the satisfaction comes from saying something cutting, something that lands like a slap. But it never does. It comes from the quiet, from someone finally hearing, in your voice, that you've already moved past the version of you they thought they could write off without consequence. Funny thing about people who do that, who decide you're not worth a seat at the table, not worth an invitation, not worth the truth, they always assume you'll still be standing there, exactly where they left you when they finally turn back around. I wasn't. So, my mother said, quieter now, almost childlike. Will you help us? I looked out the window. The plant on my sill had 2 new leaves I hadn't noticed before. I haven't decided yet, I said. But I will tell you what I know. And then we'll talk about what happens next. We met at their house 2 days later. Not a restaurant, not neutral ground. I wanted them in the kitchen, where the napkin swatches had once been fanned out across the table, as they mattered more than I did. My father looked older than
Welcome
I
back.
remembered.
Today we're focusing on stream
That
quality
happens,
and
I think,
consistency.
when
Your
the
feedback
thing
helps
you've
us
been
improve.
hiding
Let's dive in.
finally catches up to your face. Thank you for coming, my mother said, too formally, like I was a guest instead of her daughter. I know everything, I said, before either of them could start managing the conversation the way they usually do, softening edges, redirecting blame, turning facts into feelings so they're harder to argue with. I know it's not a refinance. I know it was never a formality. I know the house involved is the one Grandma left both of us, and I know you've restructured it twice to push off a payment you were hoping would just disappear before anyone had to explain it to me. My father opened his mouth. I kept going, evenly. Before he could fill the space with something rehearsed, I know you didn't tell me when you took it out. I know you didn't tell me when it started slipping. I know you didn't tell me the wedding thing wasn't really about space or seasons or whatever language Mom used on the phone. It was about not wanting me in a room full of people asking questions you weren't ready to answer yet. Silence. My mother's hands were folded so tightly on the table that her knuckles had gone pale. So, I said, you asked if I'd help. Yes, my father said quietly. Please. I let that word sit there for a moment. Please. A word I couldn't remember either of them using with me in years, not without something performative wrapped around it. I'm not going to scream at you, I said. I'm not going to walk out either. I just want to be clear about something first, because I think you've both spent a long time assuming I'd eventually fold, the way I always have. I looked at my mother specifically. Am I invited to the wedding? She blinked, thrown by the question, like she'd expected me to lead with money and not memory. Of course, sweetheart. We never meant. That's not what I asked, I said, still calm. I asked if I'm invited. Not if you're sorry, not if it was a misunderstanding. I'm asking if, separate from this conversation, separate from the $48,000 sitting between us right now, you actually want me there. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a no. It was worse than a no. It was a pause long enough to calculate whether saying yes now would cost them anything. I think, I said slowly, we should talk about the loan as its own thing, not as a trade. Because the moment we treat my help like a price for an invitation, we both know what kind of family we actually are. I didn't say I wouldn't help. I didn't say I would either. I just let the question hang there between us, bigger somehow than the number ever was, and watched both of them realize, almost at the same time, that I wasn't asking it to be cruel. I was asking it because, for the first time in my life, I actually wanted to know the answer. My sister called the next morning, and for the first time in weeks, her voice didn't have a single exclamation point hiding in it. "Mom told me what you said," she said, "about the invitation." "Okay." "I didn't know," she added quickly, "about the loan thing being so... I thought it really was just space, venue numbers, I swear." I believed her, mostly. My sister has never been a liar so much as someone who's very good at not asking questions that might complicate her day. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always feel like one from the outside. "It's fine," I said, and I meant it more than she probably expected. "Will you still come? To the wedding, I mean. If there's space now?" If there's space now. I noticed the phrasing. 3 days ago, there hadn't been space for me at all. And now, suddenly, with a number hanging over the family as weather nobody could control, there was. "I'll think about it," I said. Which was true. I didn't go to the cake tasting that weekend. I found out about it anyway, the way you find out about most things now. A photo posted by my aunt. The three of them gathered around a table with little plated samples. My mother laughing at something, my sister holding up a fork like a trophy. 42 likes. A handful of comments calling it so exciting with their own exclamation points. Borrowed, it seemed, from somewhere. I looked at it for a while, not with anger, more like the way you'd look at a photo from a vacation you didn't take, mildly curious about a version of your life that simply never happened. Underneath that post, in a thread I scrolled past without meaning to, my mother had commented on something unrelated, a friend's congratulations on the wedding planning, with a string of heart emojis and the words, "We're just so blessed right now." I thought about the voicemail. It's a little important. I thought about the bank documents still sitting in a folder on my desk, the balloon payment creeping closer by the day, unresolved, untouched by blessings. Both things were true at the same time. That's the part nobody tells you about families like mine. The joy and the unraveling don't take turns. They sit right next to each other, sharing the same table, the same smiling photo, the same exclamation points. I didn't message my mother about the post. I didn't need to make the comparison out loud. I think somewhere underneath the cake, samples and the heart emojis, she already knew it herself, that she'd spent 3 days deciding I wasn't worth a seat at a celebration, and 3 more realizing I was the only person standing between her and a debt she could no longer outrun alone. That's its own kind of consequence, not the kind you hand someone, the kind they hand themselves, slowly, every time they scroll past a happy photo and remember, somewhere in the back of their mind, what it actually cost to take it. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just watched the realization arrive on its own schedule, the way it always does, late, uninvited, and impossible to undo. I helped them in the end. Not all of it. I want to be honest about that too, because clean endings make better stories than they make truths. I covered part of the loan, the part that would have triggered foreclosure on a house my grandmother never meant to become collateral for anyone's silence. The rest, my father is paying down slowly, on his own, the way it probably should have been handled from the start. I went to the wedding. I sat at a table near the back, not out of bitterness, just logistics. Seating
Welcome back.
charts get
Today we're focusing on
finalized
stream quality
before
and
family
consistency.
decides to
Your feedback
fix the
helps us
things they
improve.
broke.
Let's dive in.
My sister looked happy. I mean that plainly, without performing happiness for her in return or against her. She looked like someone who'd built a day out of things she cared about. And for a few hours, I let myself just watch that, without needing it to mean anything more than what it was.
My mother hugged me at the reception longer than usual. She didn't say sorry again. I think we'd both quietly agreed that the word had already done what it could. It's been a few months now. Now, this morning, I was folding laundry when my coffee went lukewarm again. Steam stopped rising the same way it always does. That small, ordinary ending nobody notices unless they're already paying attention to small things. My phone lit up on the counter, screen down, vibrating once. I let it ring. Not out of strategy this time. Not as a move. I just wasn't in a hurry anymore. And that, more than anything else that happened this year, feels like the real ending to this. I picked it up eventually. It was my sister, asking if I wanted to get lunch next week. No exclamation points, no fishing for reassurance underneath the words. Just a question, asked plainly, the way people ask things when they've stopped expecting to be doubted. Sure, I told her. I'd like that. I meant it. I think that's the part I didn't expect going into all of this. Not out of strategy this time. Not as a move. I just wasn't in a hurry anymore. And that, more than anything else that happened this year, feels like the real ending to this. I picked it up eventually. It was my sister, asking if I wanted to get lunch next week. No exclamation points, no fishing for reassurance underneath the words. Just a question, asked plainly, the way people ask things when they've stopped expecting to be doubted. Sure, I told her. I'd like that. I meant it. I think that's the part I didn't expect going into all of this. I water it on purpose these days, instead of remembering at the last minute that it's still alive. Funny, the things you start tending to once you stop performing calm and actually find it. The coffee was cold by the time I got back to it. I didn't mind. Some things are better understood once they've had the chance to settle.